welcome to lesson 4.4. Today we're going to be talking about simplifying fractions. So first of all, when you think about simplifying something, you're breaking things down, you're making it smaller, you're making it easier to work with. So this is what we're going to be doing to fractions. So we have two terms that we need to talk about first. The first term is equivalent fractions, which are fractions that look different but they're actually equal. So fractions like 1/2 and 25/50, both of these are equivalent fractions because if you divided it out, they're both equal to 0.5 or to 1/2. So this is coming in handy when we're simplifying fractions because in order to make a fraction simpler, you're going to have to change the fraction to look like something else, but the original fraction and the ending fraction are still going to be equal. We got to keep it proportional because we want equivalent fractions. So we're going to break it down. So the simplest form of a fraction is when the greatest common factor of the numerator and the denominator is 1. So basically you can't break them down anymore. So like an example of simplest form fraction would be 2/3 because the only factor they have in common is 1. Because 2 can't be broken down anymore and 3 can't be broken down anymore. So that is an example of a simplified fraction. Alright, there are two methods that we're going to talk about of how to break down these fractions. Then you get to choose whichever one is easier for you. So, and sometimes it's just the fraction. We'll say, okay, well this form's easier for this type of fraction and this form is easier for this type of fraction. That will be, as you get more comfortable with this stuff, you'll be able to make smarter choices on this. So the first method is to divide common factors. So basically you start off with a fraction like 6/24 and you say, okay, 2 goes into both of these. So you divide 2 out of the numerator and denominator. And now you're left with a different equivalent fraction. You're left with 3/12. And you're like, oh wait, 3 goes into 12. So let's divide 3 out of both. So you divide 3 out of both and you end up with 1/4. And then the numerator and the denominator, the greatest common factor is 1. So that is how we would simplify by dividing common factors out. Basically, you just take it one little step at a time. You're just saying, oh, 2 goes into them, let's take it out. 3 goes into them, let's take it out. Can we take anything else out? Nope, we're simplified. So it's just taking like little steps. Now, method 2 is by dividing the greatest common factor. So that is why we spent some time talking about the greatest common factor and breaking down with prime factorization and the factor tree, is so that we will be able to do it for this type of fraction. So this is probably a good strategy for really big fractions, like 200 over something, because that way, because if you're going each little step, you're like, oh, divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 3, divide by 2, and you're going on, it's going to take a long time to do. So this probably would be a quicker method for big fractions. But in this example, I just did it with the same fraction. So instead of just dividing little steps at a time, I'm going to go ahead and break them down and just take one big number out of both of them. So the reason why we do the greatest common factor and doing the factor tree is because instead of just dividing by a 2, then dividing by a 3, we're just doing it all at once. So we're figuring out, okay, what's the biggest number they have both in common? We're going to take it out and now it's simplified. So in this case, we broke it down and we saw that they have a 2 and a 3 in common. So you see that the greatest common factor is 6. So you divide a 6 out of the numerator, the denominator, and you're left with a simplified form. So as you can see, either way you end up with the same answer. It just depends on kind of which way is preferable to you. Now let's go ahead and do a few examples. Alright, let's look at example number 1. The first example, we have 7/28. So I'm going to look at the fraction, and I automatically think that they both have 7 in common. So I'm just going to go ahead and start dividing out my common factors. So I'm going to go ahead and divide a 7 out of the numerator and a 7 out of the denominator, and I'm going to be left with 1/4. And now, already my fraction is simplified because 1 and 4 don't have anything else in common other than 1. So we're simplified. Alright, my next example, we have 8/20. Now this time I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to go ahead and factor out using the factor tree. So I'm going to go ahead and break down 8. We have 2 times 2 times 2 gives you 8. And then in order to get 20, you'll break it down and you'll have 2 times 2 times 5. Alright, so let's see what we have in common. We have a 2 and a 2, a 2, a 2. So our GCF is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and take a 4 out of the numerator and a 4 out of the denominator. So 8 divided by 4 gives you 2. 20 divided by 4 gives you 5. So 2/5 is our simplified fraction. And we know it's simplified because 2 and 5 do not have any common factors. Alright, let's look at our last example, or our third example. We have 27 over 36. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same process as this and break it down with the factor tree. So we have 27 and we have 36. Alright, 27 is 9 times 3, and then we have 3 times 3. And so the prime factorization is 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, for 36, you can break it down into 6 times 6, then 2 times 3, and 2 times 3. So our prime factorization is 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. Alright, now let's see what we have in common. We have a 3 over here, 3 over here, 3, 3. We have nothing else in common, so our GCF is going to be 9. So we're going to go ahead and take a 9 out of the numerator and a 9 out of the denominator. So if I divide out 9 here, so 27 divided by 9 gives you 3. And then 36 divided by 9 gives you 4. So our simplified fraction is 3/4. And we know that it's in simplest form because nothing goes into 3 and 4 together. Alright, let's go ahead and look at our last example. That is a word problem. It says Mary received $15 for her weekly allowance. She spent $10 at the movies. What fraction of her allowance did she spend on the movies? So, we got to go ahead and remember, when we're talking about fractions, we're talking about a part over a whole of something. So we know that $15 is all of her money. So that is the whole. And then she spent a part of her money. She spent $10. So we're going to put 10 over 15. So now we're going to go ahead and just start simplifying. So I'm going to just go ahead and do it by taking out a factor at a time. So I know that 10 and 15, 5 goes into both. So I'm going to go ahead and take out 5 of the numerator and the denominator. So 10 divided by 5 gives you 2. And then 15 divided by 5 gives you 3. So our final answer is that she spent 2/3 of her allowance on going to the movies. Alright, make sure you have all of your notes on the front side. Make sure that you have watched these examples and that you understand them. If you need to, go ahead and rewind back and watch any other part that you need to. You can also go into your book and look at more examples. But now we're going to go ahead and do some on-your-own questions. Alright, you only have 3 problems to do for me tonight. Go ahead and break down these fractions and make them in the simplest form possible. Remember, the numerator and the denominator, the GCF has to be equal to 1 in order to be simplified. Good luck. We'll see what you get tomorrow.